Welcome to the March 2015 Food for Thought Education Series. Today we'll be discussing allergens. Our speakers are Maureen McNamara from Dynamic Learning, Karen Kristopeit-Parker from the Fresh Fish Company, and Megan Bradley from Share Our Strength. We'd like to say thank you to our Food for Thought Education Series sponsor, Pinnacle Assurance. Please hold your questions until the end of the session. For those on the webinar, in the bottom right-hand corner, you will see a chat box where you can ask questions. If you only see a plus sign next to the word chat, please click on it to view the box. For those that are here in person, please raise your hand and we'll repeat the question so that it is heard by those on the webinar. I will now pass it over to Maureen, who will start the session.
Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. And as we know, food safety is so hugely important, and certainly allergens as well. Hands up, whether you're online, feel free to raise your hand or chat in, or if you're with us live, who has seen somebody have a food allergy reaction? You've seen someone have a food allergy reaction. What did you see? What was the experience of that person?
Disorientation, basically going into upchucking.
Yeah. So disorientation, vomiting, and you've also seen someone have a food allergy reaction. What were the results?
They were having trouble breathing, they were gasping, they needed medical attention.
It's really scary. So I want to start with a quick story on this, which is, it's a little bit of a play detective, too. It's how did a bartender with a shellfish allergy get rushed to the hospital? If you're listening online, feel free to type in your hunch about how bartenders aren't working. She was not working directly with oysters or shrimp or anything like that. So how did a bartender get rushed to a hospital because of a shellfish allergy? Take a moment to consider what possibly could have created that. And let me know if anything's being typed in. And for us, any hunches on how a bartender could have gotten,
Clam juice?
Clam juice. Ooh, I like that guess. That wasn't it. Shellfish allergy. Not even, it actually wasn't anything she worked directly with. No juice, no product, nothing fishy that she worked directly with. I'll reveal the mystery in just a sec. Any other guesses?
Cross-contamination.
Yes, cross-contamination is correct. Here's the scoop. She was so highly allergic to shellfish, of course she couldn't work in the kitchen, but I wonder why her choice to even work in a restaurant that served shellfish was still happening. Somebody, a guest at table 42, ate shrimp and had a beer. Now, typically in most of our restaurants, beer glasses often go back to the bar for washing. She touched a glass whose previous drinker had been eating shrimp, and shrimp juice was on the glass, and when she washed the glass, bam, allergic reaction. So it's super significant to be aware of these food allergies. And does anyone online or with us have a food allergy that you're aware of? It affects a ton of people. So we'll talk about all of those, the basics. We'll set some goals for us as well. And I want to give you a quick introduction to our team. I'm Maureen McNamara. I've been facilitating food safety training classes for about 18 years. I got a lot of stories on all things food safety, and allergens certainly are part of the ServSafe certification program that we lead. Training's been my gig for over 20 years, and the hospitality industry is a foundational passion for my training as well. I'm going to pass it over to Megan to quick bio about herself, and then Karen as well.
My name is Megan. I'm a registered dietitian, and I work for Share Our Strength. We teach cooking and nutrition classes to low-income families. But before I did that, I worked in a Failure to Thrive clinic, which is for little kiddos who aren't growing. So I would see a lot of kids with food allergies who were having issues growing because of it. So usually like a celiac disease or gluten allergy.
Good morning, my name is Karen Kristopeit-Parker. I'm the co-owner of the Fresh Fish Company seafood restaurant in Denver. Owned and operated now for going on 34 years, and in my experience in the business, I've seen many food allergy reactions, not only with customers, but with employees, and hopefully some of my experience can help you with how to train your staff and deal with these kind of problems.
Thanks, ladies. All right, let's get right into a little test your knowledge for us here. So if you're online or listening to this as a recording, feel free to write in your answer. If you're with us live, just give us a shout out. We'll just give a quick pause so our online folk can play as well. All right, allergy quiz. You got a 50-50 shot with this. Since this is just a true or false, ooh, the odds are good. A hot grill can kill any allergens cooked on that surface. Answers are being typed in, answers are being written down, and our guesses are...
False.
False is correct. It is fiction. In fact, food allergies cannot be removed by heat unless the allergy is specific to raw or undercooked fish. Now, I suppose if you followed my mother's motto, is it's not done till it's smoking with an internal temp of 200, maybe that would help everyone's cause, but it would also be quite inedible. All right, question 2, true or false? Write it down, type it in, or shout it out in just a moment. Cheese-filled ravioli is a greater dairy allergy risk than spaghetti when the same boiling water is used to cook both. It's a bit of a riddle as well. So what's your hunch? Is spaghetti and the ravioli equally as risky, or is the ravioli riskier? Cheese ravioli cooked in boiling water. Take it out. Same boiling water as then put spaghetti in there. What's risky? Yeah, ravioli, cheese-filled ravioli for sure. Spaghetti as well. That hot boiling water, I mean, who's ever watched a cheese ravioli maintain its cheesiness? Certainly little bits of cheese leak out, and it doesn't take much to have it become an allergen. All right, here's another one. Using an egg substitute can be dangerous to someone with an egg allergy. True or false? The answers are being typed in, written down, and we've got a one vocal for true. Yeah, it is true. Actually, allergens can be found in a little bit of egginess, that's the official term, is found in egg substitute as well. All right, here's our final true or false. Test your brilliance. When cooking a stir fry for someone with a shellfish allergy, any wok can be used as long as no one puts shellfish in it that day. True or false? You got a 50-50 shot on this. Any guesses? False. Yeah. In fact, it's not even about the wok so much. And this is something that really we encourage you to consider, is that although you might be making a stir fry with only vegetables, no shellfish, it is often that a stir fry sauce has a shellfish stock. And although it may be just veggies, be aware of the sub-ingredients within sauces and seasonings as well. So that's important to consider. So I'd like us to take a moment to consider, and in fact just write it down on a piece of paper or on your notes. What are the risks of not training your team about allergens, of not creating special procedures to address allergy concerns for your guest? So just take a moment, write down what are the risks of not learning about, training your team, or having policies and procedures to handle guest allergy inquiries. You can type them in or directly online. If you're joining us for the recording of this, feel free to just write them down and we'll compare the answers to the live course here in just a moment. All right, so who's first? What are the risks of either A, not having a policy procedures for handling allergy inquiries, or not training our team? Who's first?
They're so shy.
Injury or death. You're not being dramatic. The response is injury or death. It is so true that death is a possibility. Apparently, breathing is required to live, and significant allergic reactions can close a throat. This absolutely does occur. So you're right. The risk could be guests that can literally never come back, and it's certainly a big deal. What else would be the risk?
One
Lawsuit.
might expect legal responsibility.
Absolutely. Our liability, possible negligence, lawsuit, right? So training our team shows a committed professional industry. And whether it's your kitchen team, your host team, your service team, your bartending team, everybody gets to be aware of these allergies. True or false, questions are coming in more and more about allergies. Aren't we seeing this on the rise? So really the risk is also us just looking unknowledgeable in an industry that's extraordinarily competitive. So consider that. And one more, take a moment now and just write down what are the common allergens. Brainstorm. Don't look ahead, just brainstorm. What are the common allergens? The biggies we hear about. And then I'd love to, as you're typing in your answers online or writing them live or for the recording, just also write down the most obscure allergy anyone's ever let you know about, the most random one you've heard of. Take just 8 more seconds, jotting down these common allergens. Okay, who's first? Common allergens. Tell me, what's on your list? And then get ready to amuse and delight us with the most random allergen you've heard of.
Peanuts.
Peanuts, a classic. Tree nuts, peanuts, pine nuts, classic one. Who's next?
Dairy.
Dairy, absolutely. Including eggs. I cannot tell you, recently I've been out for dinner with a friend who's allergic to eggs, and he says this each time the server has immediately suggested something that has eggs in it. He was specifically asking about, I'm allergic to eggs, can I have the ice cream? Oh, absolutely. Because ice cream doesn't have eggs. Well, some doesn't, some does. And it's fascinating. Also, it immediately suggested a sauce that was an egg sauce, that had mayonnaise in it. He said, well, mayonnaise doesn't have eggs. Okay. So again, you can see the earlier question, what's the risk? It's us not looking knowledgeable, savvy, and professional. So we've got eggs, peanuts,
Shellfish.
shellfish for sure.
Gluten.
Mushrooms, yeah. So really some common allergens, and on our slide we can see, you said most of these, right? Fish, eggs, milk, dairy, wheat, one we didn't put words to, but you probably all had written down. All right, just for kicks, just real quick, what are the most obscure allergen you've heard of?
We were told they were allergic to store-bought eggs.
Okay, so an allergic not to specific maybe farm-raised eggs, but store-bought eggs, or backyard eggs are okay, but store-bought eggs.
They didn't let us know the full answer to that. But that was what we were.
That's what they were aware of. Okay, an allergic reaction to store-bought eggs. What else? Any other?
Allergic to eggplant skin, but not eggplant.
All right, eggplant skin, not the eggplant. Both of those kind of ring to me, I don't know, we'd have to do some investigation, but to how it's processed. Eggs are typically have a sanitizer sprayed on them, like when they're washed and sanitized, so how someone could grab an egg from a backyard or from a store. There could be some type of chemical reaction there. One of the oddest allergens I've heard of, anything that used to have a hoof. But it was a temporary allergy. It went away after 7 years. Oddly, there was actually some answers. Did you hear about this? On the East Coast, there was a tick biting people, and that tick bite would create an allergy to anything that used to have a hoof. I don't know. Google that. That's just the word on the street. So we know that
we
the
have
common
one.
allergens
Fruit
are
with
pretty
skins.
powerful. Fruit skins, yeah, thank you. So take a moment, now that we know these common allergens, and what are the symptoms? When you think about the symptoms, and my earlier question was, who's seen someone have an allergic reaction? And as you look at this, the symptoms that you said before, it could be truly making people very sick, or, as the final bullet says, the cause of death. Certainly, we are in an industry that creates delicious things to make people's experiences and living better. We never want to be a contribution to anyone's illness, injury, and certainly death. So, hives or not being able to breathe are certain things to be aware of. And be aware when you see these symptoms, react immediately. I am going to pass over our conversation to Kristopeit-Parker to guide us through details. And as a savvy professional operator, she really knows what it's like to train her team and be able to tell guests and instruct guests powerfully on allergens.
Very good. Good morning. My name is Kristopeit-Parker. I'm the owner of the Fresh Fish Company in Denver, Colorado. We're a seafood restaurant. How many operators are here? Okay. So have you ever had this happen in your restaurant? It's a Saturday night, you're walking the floor, you're talking to guests, you realize that one of your guests is gasping, they're wheezing, something is obviously not wrong, or something's obviously not right. What do? First of all, as an operator, you want to remain calm, but I definitely recommend that you call 911. Medical attention is definitely needed if a guest is having problems breathing and they're gasping. This is very unfortunate. Nobody ever likes to have something happen in their restaurant where you have to call out the paramedics, get an ambulance out there, cause disruption. But more importantly, how can you prevent this from happening? What do you do in the future so that you can make sure your guests are protected, also your employees? And my advice to you is training, training, training. 20 years ago, this wasn't a big issue. It didn't seem like there were so many people that had allergies. But nowadays, it's increasingly every day. I just had a guest Sunday night that was in the restaurant. I'm talking to tables and I'm inquiring, how's your dining experience? And this woman doesn't have any food. I said, is everything okay? You know, where's your meal? She says, I have so many allergies, I won't eat out in the restaurant. Having an opportunity to serve her would have been wonderful, but she was trying to play it safe. So I had another experience. A little boy, he had a high allergy to nuts and seeds. So the server thought, well, we'll just get him a hamburger. No problem. His parents went crazy when the hamburger was served and the bun had sesame seeds on it. So there's so many things to think about. The item that you're serving, the ingredients in it, and how it's prepared all play a factor in how you can keep your customers safe and your employees. 15 million reasons to be allergen trained. Americans with food allergies dine where they feel safe. The number of people affected by food allergies is trending higher every year. Dining out is a serious concern for them. Those who have allergies are often unaware of which restaurants can safely accommodate them, if at all. Making your staff allergen aware can help you increase your revenue opportunities. And you and your employees need the basic information to ensure that you can keep your guests safe. Again, like I said before, training, training, training. How do you train your staff? You've got people coming and going, different shifts. It's so important. Like you said earlier, you don't want to have somebody, be responsible for death or going to the hospital. I recommend let them know what's in the ingredients in their meals, how items are prepared, and it's not a hard thing to do. You can take your menu, write on your menu what items have nuts and seeds, write on your menu what items have dairy. But that basic training to your staff is so important. How many of you get a call every week about gluten? Gluten is the big buzzword right now. Do you offer gluten-free items? Can I come eat in your restaurant? I have a high gluten intolerance. We get probably 20 phone calls a week. And we've made some real strides in our menu on how we can accommodate these people. It's a huge, huge amount of people. And if you can accommodate them, then it will increase your revenue opportunities. What kind of oil do you fry with? I know 25 years ago we fried with peanut oil. You'd be crazy to fry with peanut oil now. There's canola oil, there's soybean oil, there's vegetable oil. If somebody's got an allergy to nuts or seeds, they need to know what kind of oil you fry in, because this could be a potentially hazardous situation if they got something fried and you're using soybean oil.
Karen, can I jump in with a quick story on oil? This is shocking, but how detailed are we with our recipes? Chocolate fountains, who's a fan? Love a good chocolate fountain. The first time I saw that, I thought it was heaven. I was like, what? Now I'm a little more aware of the potential for cross-contamination. But with the chocolate fountain, it said the recipe, there's a little bit of oil added to the chocolate fountain for the flowiness of it. And the oil was listed there, and the person preparing it, that oil wasn't available, so they just grabbed another oil and blended in 2 cups of that oil to the chocolate for the chocolate fountain flowiness. And then later, they weren't on site for the wedding reception, and somebody at the wedding reception asked, like, does anything in this have peanuts? And assuredly, the response was, why no, nothing in the chocolate has peanuts, except an hour earlier, that helpful teammate that needed to mix in 2 cups of oil used peanut oil. So even when we have the recipes, are we training our team to be accountable to not just sub one oil for another? And probably endless stories like that. So when you bring up oil, not only knowing what oil, but staying with the standard operating procedures of specific ingredients and not renegading a change to the recipe.
Well, and we also, all of our fish is mesquite with grill, and to keep that fish turning good on the grill, they have to oil the grill down. So what kind of oil are they putting on the grill? I mean, there's so many little factors that you don't always think about, and that's why it's so important to train your staff. Their conscious effort will make that customer feel safe and know that, when I go out to your restaurant, even though I have an allergy, I feel safe and I know that I can eat there and have a great time. And I think that's, one of the things it's all about is, consumers are so much more aware today and so much more, they want to know, at my restaurant, a seafood restaurant, what's this fish farm raised? What's this fish wild caught? So many other things just, in addition to allergies. So educating your consumers and educating your staff is so important. What are the top foods that cause allergic reactions? I know we touched on this a little bit earlier. Look at this list up here. Some of these items, most of these items are probably in your kitchen, and you know what they are. And if it's an ingredient in one of your recipes, can it cause an allergic reaction? I do have in your pamphlet information on all of these items, and then there's also a great test that you can test your knowledge to see how well you do with some of these items.
What is that?
Okay, the one on the bottom left, I believe is pronounced Ganja, and this is what you find in Nutella. Hazelnut. Okay, so if you've got some sort of a chocolate spread or something, how many of your servers know that this is, if somebody has an allergic reaction or allergy to nuts or seeds, you do not want to serve them this product. But these are common, they'll be found in your kitchen, and I've got the definitions for everyone so you can test your knowledge later. Only 8 foods cause 90% of the allergic reactions. I know we talked about this earlier, but you can see here on the scale, dairy's up there, peanuts, shellfish, tree nuts, eggs, fish, soy, wheat, and others. And what do you do? I mean, some people confuse dairy and eggs. You know, there's definite, you know, if you're allergic to dairy, you're going to be allergic to the lactose and the lecithin and other things like that. But there's a distinct difference between dairy and eggs, and making sure you let your staff know about that is very important. Twice as many people are allergic to shellfish as to nuts. Owning a seafood restaurant is very scary sometimes because I get a phone call. My wife is highly allergic to seafood. What have you got available that we can come and dine with you? Yes, we can accommodate them. We've got prime rib and we've got steaks, but you also have to think about how those items are prepared because you don't want to have cross-contamination. Shellfish allergies can be very scary. I've had employees, kind of like Maureen talked about, immediately they start to, get hives, they start to swell up, they get sweaty, and they're having a reaction to shellfish. And they may not have consumed it, just accidentally touched the shell of a lobster. They're fishing out a lobster from the tank. Or they're, helping a guest with crab legs, and immediately they have a reaction. So the shellfish allergies are very scary along with the others, but 7 million compared to 3.3 million have shellfish allergies. Nuts can cause 4 out of 5 food allergy fatalities. Think of all the things that we prepare to use nuts. Almonds, peanuts, hazelnuts, walnuts. Sometimes it's in a crust that they bake with. Sometimes it's in a cheese. Sometimes it's in the Nutella or the chocolate, or it's in the oil. Nuts can be very scary. And especially when you're feeding children. Sometimes kids don't know that this thing has, it's a peanut sauce, or, it's got the sesame seeds. And, if a child is ever affected by an allergic reaction, it can be very, very scary. So the nuts, to me, is huge. Let your staff, let your people know, what products do you have that have nuts in it. We do a Sunday brunch, and we also have issues with nuts and seeds and things on Sunday brunch. So, you've got a child going through, and they see a brownie. They're like, oh, Mom, can I have a brownie? Well, it says fudge nut. Make sure you're very clear on what's in those brownies, and we also try to label it on our menu that we hand out for brunch so people can see. The National Restaurant Association has Serve Safe Allergens online course. This is a fantastic program. It's very reasonable. You can go online and take this course, have your staff take this course, and learn even more and get some fantastic online training. How many of you have a program right now in your operation for training your staff about allergies? Very good. Wonderful. Wonderful. I would ask everybody here to challenge yourself. Next week in your operation, at your shift meeting, communicate to your staff how important it is that we communicate responsibly and knowledgeably to our customers about allergies and allergic reactions and what we have that we can accommodate those guests with. Train them what kind of ingredients are in the menu items. Post a list, most common items with nuts. Post a list, this is our bread and this is what's in our bread. Or take your menu and label your menu. That's the easiest thing to do. Put your menu up there with the nuts, the seeds, the dairy, so that your employees are knowledgeable and can communicate to the staff. And then I would also tell them, if you don't know the answer, ask them. How many times does a server, they want to pretend like they know the answer and they have the wrong answer? If you don't know the answer, ask somebody who knows the answer. One of the things that we did and I'll pass these around. We made a menu chart for our guests so that they can see what has nuts and seeds and farm raised or wild caught. And I'll just pass these around. Those of you online can ask Sarah to see a copy of our menu with the key. Also color-coded.
And just a reminder for everybody with us or online or even listening to this recording, please just keep typing in your questions if you're online. We'll handle all your questions in a moment. And if you are listening to this recording, feel free to email either of the three of us directly with your specific allergy questions, and we'll do our best to get some information and responses to you. So keep writing down your questions, and we'll get to those in a few moments. Thank you. Next up is Megan Bradley giving us some more details on what she knows about the insights and information for allergens.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the medical side of allergies and the effect that it has on the body. So as we've kind of all hinted to, is that the allergy kind of population, or folks that are being affected by allergies, is growing in the United States. It's also growing in the population of children that are affected. So at this point, it's 1 in 13 children are affected by food allergies, which is a huge number. And so what exactly is a food allergy? Because I think no one was rude enough, I guess, or wanted to share the crazy things we've all heard. So I also have worked in restaurants. So once someone told me they were allergic to black pepper, so anything that had black pepper on it, they could not have. So I think we've all experienced kind of the extreme side of what someone maybe self-defines as a food allergy, right, versus what truly is a food allergy. So for folks who are on the phone or on the webinar, you can chat in, folks in the room, when you think of food allergy, what do you think of? What first comes to mind? What has to happen to make it a food allergy?
Reaction.
Eating it?
Reaction.
A reaction, right? So the big thing with a food allergy is that there has to be an immune response with a food allergy. So when we eat something, our body's immune system, our job is to kind of fight things, right? So our immune system is to, and hopefully, attack bacteria and germs, right? In this case, our body has a little bit of a glitch. And so what's happening is our body is attacking a food protein that we've eaten. It thinks the protein is trying to hurt us, and it's attacking it, and it's releasing something called histamine. So when we think of Benadryl, right, that's the brand name that we all take if we get allergies, that's an antihistamine. What that's doing is that's swooping in, and it's kind of putting a barrier or deactivating your histamine. And the histamine is what comes into our body and creates all the things we've talked about. The swelling, the itchy eyes, the runny nose, and the really severe cases, the closing of the throat. So I think it's just important for us to understand kind of how that happens and why that happens so that we can understand the severity of a food allergy. So the key is that it needs to have an immune response to be a true food allergy. So, and they also are IgE mediated, which is just about a specific immunoglobulin in your blood system, but that's a little more detailed. Key thing, it's your body kind of attacking a food protein. So an allergy versus an intolerance. So those are actually very important to think about. They have different reactions in the body, but the severity that the person who is experiencing them feels can feel the same, if that makes sense. So an allergy is always going to have an immune response, and it can cause anaphylactic shock, which is when a traditional closing up of the throat, where it kind of closes off an airway. An intolerance traditionally does not include the immune system, but it can have some of the similar symptoms. It's just not going to go into anaphylactic shock. So what are some of the common food intolerances that we've heard while in the business? Dairy, right? So lactose intolerance. Wheat. There we go. Great. So what is lactose intolerance? Why? What do we need to work at? Like, what's the concern around that? What's happening in the body with that one?
It's just not breaking down the sugars of the dairy.
Yeah, so they're missing, they're missing, they're either the enzyme, so something called lactase. So anytime something has an ASE, an ACE, at the end is going to be an enzyme in your body. So that person either does not have enough of that or that's not working well. So it doesn't allow them to break down the lactose, which is a sugar, a milk sugar. So when you hear someone who is lactose intolerant, it means their body is not able to break that down. So usually with that one, they're not going to have the closing of the airway, but they're going to be very uncomfortable. And so it's going to be gas and bloating and swelling. So yes, it's not life-threatening, but very, very uncomfortable for the person who has to experience it. The one that we are hearing a lot more about is wheat intolerance or gluten intolerance. So I have a hard time with this because gluten intolerance is actually a disease. It's called celiac disease. Has anyone heard that? So celiac disease actually does involve the immune system. So this is one of the intolerances that doesn't fit into that kind of cheat of normally it doesn't involve the immune system. So what happens with celiac disease? If someone comes in and says, I have celiac disease, what's going on in their body? Does anyone know in the room or on the phone? That's okay. This is my degree, so I should know. This is not your degree, so you don't have to worry. So in that case, their body is not breaking down the wheat protein. So technically wheat, rye, and sometimes oats. So oats, traditionally oats are not grown in their own perfect field without air blowing over them, right? So that's why you'll see people who say, I'm allergic to rye, wheat, and oats, because sometimes oats are a cross-contamination issue. Technically, people who have celiac disease are most likely not allergic to oats, but it's because of the way in which they're grown. So what happens with that, instead of having a shock, anaphylactic shock where they have the swelling of the throat, what happens with celiac disease is when they consume the wheat protein and it gets digested in our small intestines, we have something, this is going to take us back to like ninth grade science. We have something called villi inside of our small intestines, and I think of them as kind of the coral. They kind of have lots of little fingers, so I'm waving my hands for folks on the phone. And what those do is they're the way that help us absorb the nutrients of the food we're eating. So the food kind of passes through as we digest it, right? When someone with celiac disease eats gluten, what happens is it builds up a coating on their villi, and eventually they flatten because there's so much kind of attacking and breaking down of those villi. So when we have something that has lots of edges, and it takes a while to go through, versus something that has flattened villi, what's happening is food is going to pass through quicker. It's also going to cause malabsorption. So because of slowing down or allowing them to not get all the vitamins and nutrients absorbed. So people with celiac disease are going to show up, or what we would call in the medical field, they're going to present with malnutrition. And so that's when I would see a lot of kids who were having issues growing because they weren't getting the nutrition they needed from their food. So that's a very extreme case. We also have people who just like, who have what I would consider a sensitivity to gluten, and they're going to have gas, kind of distended bellies, things like that, much like lactose intolerance. They're not going to have any type of closing of the throat, but they're going to be very uncomfortable. So I think that's just good to just kind of distinguish between those. To help us better understand, because I think gluten intolerance or celiac disease is really grown in the last few years. So I like to call this the allergy spectrum. There really is an allergy spectrum with food. There is also what people perceive as an allergy spectrum. So a couple of things just to keep in mind, and you guys are welcome to shout it out or chat it in. But what are some of the things you feel like, really, is that really an allergy? Now that you know what an allergy is, you're like, really? Are you really allergic to the protein in that food source? Or do you just think you have an allergy?
I hear people say, I'm allergic to onions, and it may not be an allergy. It's just I'm going to say it so you make sure no onions mistakenly get onto my pizza. So
you like, don't like them.
Right.
But I feel like I work with a lot of kids classes, and they're like, I'm allergic to broccoli. Like, is it because you don't like broccoli, young kindergarten child, or is it because you really are allergic to it? So I think that's good.
But from an operational standpoint, does it make any difference?
Exactly, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I was going to wrap back to, and that's what I'll go into in the next slide, is that at the end of the day, whether it is a perceived allergy or a true allergy, we take them both and we think of them the same way. Because there really is a spectrum. So even with celiac disease, there are people who end up at the end of the spectrum with malnutrition and can't grow, and eventually have to have some type of like serious surgery. There are also people who don't even present with any symptoms and have celiac disease. Something that's common with celiac disease is a skin rash. and all that they present with is a skin rash, but nothing to have to do with their intestines or their digestive system. So even within just one intolerance within the allergy world, there is a huge spectrum. So then you take things like tree nuts or shellfish, and you have people, or even gluten, who are on all extremes. So I had a chef that I worked with who, bless his heart, was a baker, and all of his kids had celiac disease. And so he had to bake, obviously all gluten-free in his home, and he had to take off all of his clothes before he could enter his home if he was going to come back from the bakery, because that's how allergic they were to even breathing it in. So it's just been really, it's just kind of good for us to think about. The other thing is that there is something called an oral. So there's three different things, but the one that I really think of the most is when someone on the phone typed in fruit with skin. There actually is an allergy. It's a little bit different. It's called an oral allergy syndrome, and that has to do more with pollen and how the way the plants kind of cross-pollinate. It's a little bit harder to actually diagnose on someone, but I think maybe we've all experienced it. I know I have. I'm not going to lie. I like that food, so I just continue to eat it, even though I have the effect. Probably not something you should do, but for me, it's raw apple. So the way in which raw apples are grown, sometimes I get like a little bit of an itchy in the back of my throat. Some people, grapes, melons, avocados. Those are the main ones. And so people who have seasonal allergies, like my cousin, I feel like she's allergic to life, is what I say. She is allergic to anything green, I feel like. But because of they're from kind of similar plants, like if you're allergic to grasses, you can be allergic to tomatoes because they're similar plant families. Does that make sense? So again, they're most likely not going to have any type of allergic reaction, like as far as the closing of the throat. They're just going to get an itchy back of their throat and sometimes a swollen tongue. So I see you shaking your head. Does that happen to you?
I haven't, but I also know it's something we see all the time now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like people come in and some melons are huge right now.
Yep.
Pineapple, mangoes, like
just. And so I think it also has to do a little bit with our food system and how our food system has changed. So again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know those things, but I think I just try to respect the fact that that really is a syndrome. It really has been studied. And so when people, you're kind of like, really? The eggplant skin, but not the eggplant? But to be honest, we don't know what's going on in their body. We don't know how that eggplant has been processed. We don't know how those eggs have been processed. So again, I think it's just good to understand the spectrum. Great. So my kind of rule of thumb is that it's serious for some, so take it seriously for all. So what stories do you have about allergies that have happened in your workplace, or I guess how do you deal with them? So do you feel like you have enough knowledge about allergies to understand? I think Maureen's kind of true and false test in the beginning helped us understand. But what is your practice if someone says, I have a nut allergy, or I have a shellfish allergy?
For us, automatically it's asked to be defined as an allergy or an intolerance. So we also have a better idea because we're a really small space. So when someone says that they're seriously allergic to someone, we may have to steer them to not eat with us because of how tiny the kitchen is, and for us to claim no cross-contamination would be very difficult. So that's the first response. From there, the server would then go to management, and we'd get with the kitchen to verify for the menu. And that's because our menu changes every day, so we can't necessarily say. There's a couple ones that we all know specifically, but the ones that, it's a new item or not. But we always have gluten-free is always marked on our menus, and then there's always a dairy-free menu for the server station, because those are the two that we get the most. But then once we go into kind of those different ones, because I think now what we see is it's not just tomatoes. It's, someone comes and says, I'm allergic to tomatoes, sugar, dairy, and gluten. Like, what can I have? And then we have to, kind of start from new at the kitchen. So verify at the kitchen. Then from there, the management will talk to every single server, let them know where the allergy is, what seat number it is. And then it's always handled then by the manager on the floor, so then that they can be responsible for making sure they go wash their hands, that they're in charge of who runs the plates. But then everyone on the team is really aware of where they're at. So unfortunately, sometimes we can't cater to all of them because, again, of our size, but we do everything we can to do that.
Tell us your name.
Aileen.
Okay, so what Aileen said, just to recap that, is in the beginning, since it's a small kitchen, it's really important to distinguish for your guest if there's a difference between allergic reaction or intolerance. And I really appreciate what you said with, if the response is it's allergic, you may invite that guest to go dine elsewhere, because the cross-contamination possibilities in the small kitchen are extraordinary. Megan said something earlier about the baker that needs to remove clothing before coming home. It takes such a small flour particulate to create the intolerance or allergic reaction for someone with celiac. And a quick recap of the other thing that you said is that you have a separate station for gluten-free station and a dairy-free station in your kitchen?
Sorry, not that there's menus prepared for those two
menus.
already. Yeah, menus are ready. But we always have a gluten-free fryer. That's all that we got.
So having a gluten-free fryer, having a gluten-free and a dairy-free menu options.
Anything on the phone?
Well, I think one of the questions that comes up for that is, really, can a kitchen that bakes flour is in the kitchen, can it claim to serve anything as gluten-free?
What do you guys think in this room and on the phone?
I think it depends. I mean, it depends on how big you are. I mean, if you have this separate room, then I would say yes.
Separate HVAC system, maybe even, it's
yeah, technically no. So technically nothing is gluten-free if it's in a space in which you're baking. If you had a separate kitchen. So sometimes they call it gluten-friendly, gluten-light. There's lots of different terms. So technically the word gluten-free gets perhaps a little bit abused because that food product may not have gluten, but could it have been baked in an oven where food with gluten was baked? Could it have been grilled on a place in which gluten, toasted? So people who have a severe gluten allergy, they have to have their own peanut butter or like spread, right? So if I go in and scoop out a big thing of peanut butter to put on my my non-gluten-free bread, and then my next customer does, or I think that's not happening in a restaurant, but in your home, right? That's contaminated, that peanut butter, even though the peanut butter is gluten-free or the butter is gluten-free. Does that make sense? So toasters, people who have a severe gluten allergy have to have a separate toaster from their counter, like from someone who can't consume gluten. Does that make sense? So I think it's just good. To be honest, the majority of folks who are going to be coming into your restaurants are not going to have celiac disease. They're going to have a gluten intolerance. They're going to be on the spectrum. So honestly, I would encourage just candidness and showing them the ingredients and saying, this is how it's done. Our kitchen is small. We can do it here, but it's going to be the same oven that it was in. Is that okay for you? Because most people will be able to say, actually, yeah, that's okay. Or, no, that's not okay. That's not going to work for me. So I would encourage us to just take it seriously. I mean, I think it's Saturday night, it's the middle of a rush, and someone comes in and says something that you're like, I want to punch you. It was really like, I think I've been that person where I was like, really? You're going to come in right now with 72 allergies that I've never heard of? But to be honest, we don't know, and we need to take it seriously. So I work with a lot of the people on the very end of the spectrum who do have this problem. And so I like to just say it's very serious for them, so take it serious for all. It's kind of like, it surprises me because it's a disease, and I'm like, if people want to have it, have this disease, it's kind of like saying, I have diabetes, even if I really don't. But some people, it really feels like it. They may not have celiac disease, but they may have a different piece on the spectrum. And then, to be very honest, it builds loyal customers. So I do not have a food allergy, but I have some food preferences, and if a restaurant can accommodate those food preferences, I will come back to that restaurant and I will spend my dollars there. So just from my own personal experience, I know that, but also from the patients that I see. So if I know a restaurant will accommodate their gluten allergy or their nut allergy or their dairy allergy, I'm going to send them to that restaurant because I know that they have safe practices. So knowing that you have a practice in place, that builds confidence and allows me to then send my patients or my customers that I know there. And then also, it's a small network. So most moms or dads who have kiddos who have a nut allergy, they know each other. I swear, it's like a web. I'm like, how do you all know each other?
The nut allergy mafia.
Seriously, I think it might be a mafia. That's a good point. But they have a lot of online kind of resource centers, and then they also have lots of websites that post restaurants that are allergy safe. So whether it's for gluten or nuts or shellfish, if your restaurant can get listed on that, that means it's kind of put into the safe world of the allergy world. And so that's where they're going to go to as a resource. So I know most of the parents that I work with, they're going to use that online resource first because they want to hear from another mom or dad that their experience was similar. Because really, I focus more with kids, and I think that that is a little bit of a different ballgame than with adults. So an adult obviously is going to be able to explain their allergic reaction to you or their allergy to you. I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope with kids because not only can they not sometimes explain their allergy, but they can't explain their symptoms. So I think that's good to just keep in mind. So how to prevent, cross-contact, knowing the ingredient list, and menu labeling. So I really appreciate the menu labeling. I think that's helpful. Something that changes daily, maybe not as appropriate or as feasible, but making sure that people know what's in the ingredients and also understand that cross-contact. So when I say cross-contact, it's a little bit different than, the cross-contamination of food. What do I mean when I say cross-contact? I'm thinking pretty much the same thing. Yep. I think in the literal sense, we think of like raw chicken juice, dripping down on lettuce. But when I think of cross-contact, I think, are you getting a new set of tongs, a new bowl, a new cutting board? Are you washing your hands and putting on a new set of gloves? Does your apron need to be changed? Who's handling it and bringing out the plate? Things like that. Ingredient list, you got to dig deep. I mean, Karen showed all the different things that are in there, so you may not know that a hydrolyzed protein could have soy in it, right? So if someone comes in and says, I have a soy allergy, so I think the hardest thing for me is those spray, like, do you guys ever use the spray oil, like Pam kind of a thing? Those almost always have soy lecithin in them. So if someone has a soy allergy, they cannot have that product. So to be honest, I wouldn't have thought, I wouldn't have known that. So I think it's just good to know that and to be able to readily get to those ingredients. And then to label, and then to train your staff on those ingredients. So it doesn't look good if your staff, if someone says to your, your server, I have an egg allergy, and they respond back, yes, mayonnaise is okay, right? That doesn't make you look like you know what you're doing. So I think it's good just to make sure that you take it seriously and educate your staff. So the things that I would encourage you to kind of walk away with are focus on prevention. So whenever possible, just label things. Take it seriously because 1 in a million, right? It could be the one time. So it's better to think through it. I mean, technically it's 1 in 15 million here, but it's good for us to think about. And 1 in 13 for kids who have food allergies. And then be clear about what you can and cannot accommodate. So I've had to turn people away when I've worked in restaurants and say, we're not going to be able to accommodate that. And that does take some effort, right? I mean, that's literally sending money out the door. But I would rather, they're going to respect that, and that's going to build confidence in them versus trying to serve them something that's not going to work, like sesame seed bun, right? So I hope that helps kind of better understand what's going on in the body. If you have questions specifically about that.
Yeah, please be typing in your questions and consider what you'd like to know more about, what you'd like to learn right now. We do have time for questions and answers. I just want to pop up my contact data. I am Maureen McNamara. If I can facilitate any more learning, training, ServSafe has been my gig for over 18 years, and ServSafe Allergens is an online course available, like Karen mentioned. Megan gave us some great details. So let's take a few minutes for your questions and answers. Typing them in. If you've got one for us live, we'd be happy to accommodate that curiosity as well. And I do have a quick question for Megan while you're considering and typing these in or writing them down. You mentioned, back to 9th grade science, the villi in our intestinal tract that gets flattened over time with the heavy weight of the celiac coating, or something close to that.
That'll work.
Is that all healable?
Some of it. So it depends on how long someone's had that disease for. So traditionally, we try to diagnose it when they're young and then remove that food from their diet because it is healable. But if that person continues to have what I would consider abuse, right, like eating the gluten, it's going to continue to have that effect. So yes, it's healable, but it's better to catch it early.
So the villi, if somebody, I know this might be making stuff up, if somebody abstains completely from wheat and gluten, that villi can gain its,
Yep, it'll heal.
it'll resilient.
Yep. It'll become, yeah, it'll heal. So your intestinal tract will heal.
Yeah, okay, good.
So,
And
I know that's probably more science than you guys, but I like people to understand it so that when someone comes in and is like, I don't like gluten, that you're like, well,
that's good trivia for the
let
people.
me better. Does this really affect you? But I guess so, because I see the kids who aren't growing, and so I think the first time you see a kid who's like malnourished, especially in the United States, you're going to take this disease seriously, because it also is just kind of scary that can be happening from a food product. So I think it's good for us to take it seriously. Same with peanut allergies and the kids who have to carry their EpiPen. So I see the very extreme of those sides. Most people are not like that, but.
Well, I think there's a, celiac disease. I mean, that's a very serious allergy for us, but I always thought that it would be something like peanut.
Yeah.
Which is good to know. But what do you think is, coming from the other side, like a proper way to approach guests about, their gluten allergy, and how, I mean, without going into like practices of our kitchen and, going through the whole shebang, and telling, interacting with them to let them know that it is either safe or not. Because, if what you're saying is true, what it says on our menu is gluten-free, we have gluten in that same room, so it's not. So what's a good way to kind of approach that situation?
So the question is, how do we handle guests? What is the way we say or react to guests about their inquiries?
Right, and not making either party feel belittled.
Right. So really having it be honoring and coming from a great guest service perspective.
So my suggestion is just kind of honoring that first kind of statement that they have a gluten allergy. So I normally ask people, do you have a gluten allergy or is it celiac disease? So if you can show that you have that knowledge that like there is actually a disease, that way if they really do have celiac disease, they can then say, yes, I have celiac disease. And then in that case, you can say, we cook with all-purpose flour. We have all-purpose flour in our kitchen, or non-gluten-free flour. Is that going to be okay if that's in the air around it? So kind of a way in which you can, if they kind of opt into the very serious disease, you can go a little deeper. Most people, when they hear you say, do you have celiac disease? They'll say, well, actually, and they'll probably back off. And so, well, it's okay if it's in the sauce, but it's not okay. Or it's okay if it's fried in the same fryer, but it's not okay if it's this. Because most people are on that spectrum, and so I think helping them understand that you get that it's more than just kind of, help me understand so I can better serve you, kind of that way. That's how I go about it when I work in a restaurant, because I think what I found is most, when most customers see how seriously you're taking it, they will kind of self-select where they fall on the spectrum, because they don't want to be like, well, yes, I have celiac disease, if they don't. So I think acknowledging that there are customers who have a much more serious disease, and so I usually give some examples. Is it okay if we use gluten-free flour and that's going to be fried in our gluten-free fryer? Is that going to be okay for you? Okay. Is something like soy sauce traditionally has wheat in it. So is something like soy sauce okay for you? Is it just eating the actual bread? So I usually have like 3 examples in my head of either one that's going to be fried. So you guys have a separate fryer. So that's already.
Yeah, but no gluten-free flour.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, we have gluten-free options, but it's usually
like cornmeal or something.
We're removing something. We're
yeah.
not replacing. I mean, we don't have enough space to accommodate gluten-free bread.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all gluten or it's no gluten.
Yeah. So I think that's okay too. So I think just acknowledging here's what we have without going. I mean, I just pick 2 examples that I use every time, and that helps me. It's kind of like a polite way while respecting the customer to not belittle them, but also do some investigating. So by asking, would you like a separate fryer? Would soy sauce be okay? Or whatever sauce that has it, then you can kind of see what because if they come back and say, no, I can't have that. Does that make sense? It kind of allows you to kind of like, how big it has to be.
And what I appreciate about what Megan said here is great guest service. We're always coming from what we can do, avoiding the, no, we can't help you, gluten person. But here's what we can do, here's what we can offer. And I think this is becoming more and more, and we talked about this in the recent ServSafe class, is that kitchens that work with flour need to be candid about that when people let you know that they have celiac disease. Probably not going to be a factor for people that simply have an intolerance. Coming from the place of what we can do is really powerful. Who has the next question? Andy.
Do you increase your liability, legal liability, by getting on the special list, for example?
No, because it's
The
not.
question is, do we increase our liability if we get on the allergen-safe restaurant website that Megan referred to earlier? Being concerned with liability is always something you want to be aware of.
Yes, and I mean, okay, I'm just going to say probably not. I'd like you to all research that on your own and not come back and see me.
Advice from Megan Bradley.
That one's free and the next one costs you. So no, because it really is kind of like a sharing space, almost like a social page, and so you can put yourself in there and say we have a gluten-free and a dairy-free menu, and then when people come in, they can do it a little bit more. So when I was working in restaurants, I worked in a restaurant that was on that website. We had a gluten-free option in the sense that we were able to. Really, it wasn't gluten-free. It was like just absent of gluten. You know, it was potatoes, which don't have gluten in them. So. And that was a way for us to kind of be on that. So we had two menus, one that was nut-free and one that was gluten-free that we could present. So that was sufficient. But I think it's helpful if you want to cater to that clientele. If you do not want to cater to that clientele, do not put yourself on that website, right? Because what you're doing is saying, we take this seriously, please come to our restaurant. If you are in a small kitchen and that is not something you want to accommodate or can accommodate, I wouldn't encourage you going down that path. Because people will come in, whether you right? I mean, we all have customers come in whether we advertise gluten-free or nut-free.
Thanks, Megan. What's the next question? Curiosity, something you'd like clarification on?
Are there combinations of allergies that are more common? So like if someone is dairy, are they also going to be allergic to something else, considering eggs? Because I see that a lot, those two a lot, but are there other combinations out there that are common?
So the question is, what allergy combinations, if any, what are the combinations that are most common out there?
So it's happening more often that people are having kind of a spectrum or a variety of different allergies. Traditionally, they do not occur like if you have this, you have this. It's not a sequence. However, most young kids can be allergic to nuts and dairy, cow's milk, when they're first born and they can grow out of it. We abstain from giving young children cow's milk until they're over the age of 1 because of that. A lot of times people will present, or small children, kids kind of, with multiple allergies, and usually they're soy, nuts, and dairy, and eggs. Those kind of 4 come together, and they come in pairs, you know, but not necessarily, you don't have to have an egg allergy to have a dairy allergy. Does that make sense? They're not sequential. But they do seem, especially soy and nuts, can come together. And then a lot of times if the parents, or if your parents have asthma or allergies, your child is more likely to have a food allergy. So that's really the correlation, is genetics, but not necessarily. And they're doing a lot of interesting tests with trying to grow kids out of their peanut allergies, which I find interesting, and grow them out of their dairy allergies. So by a young age, giving them, obviously under supervision, not like a parent in their backyard. Like they go to a clinic and they give them the food that gives them an allergy. And they're trying to wean them off of their allergy. But that's in the very beginning stages. So that helps.
Who has the next question? Bring it home to your own kitchens if you desire. What are the details you desire and need to know around this? What was it? Something that Megan mentioned earlier is that oats. Oat is not wheat, but oatmeal could create a gluten reaction because of how it's grown and the open fields and the possible cross-contamination. So I can even think of some of the stores I go to, and if I'm in the gluten-free aisle, there is oats that are gluten-free. And then you would wonder, even if they're processed in a facility that has no gluten, can oats be gluten-free if they're grown outside?
If they're grown, they have to be certified. So if they're grown in a special field, I don't understand that as much, but most people just abstain from them if they have a severe allergy. But rye, barley, wheat, oats. So when we think about all the different things that, honestly, wheat and soy, I think are the hardest. I feel like shellfish is kind of literal sometimes, where you're like, do not eat this lobster. Obviously, there are some things that are like, you know, the stocks and sauces and things like that. But I feel like wheat and soy are really difficult because they're hidden a lot of times. Specifically soy, I feel like I'm like, what? Why would that be in there? Why would why would peanut oil be in chocolate sauce? So I think it's just good to know all the different words, and there actually is, through the source, so through foodallergy.org, they actually have a list that you can print out for your restaurant that has all the different ingredients. So I can send that link and you can send it out with the recording, but it's helpful to know almost what I would consider the code words for soy. So we all know soy, wheat, shellfish, fish, nuts. But what is the word that really, the chemical-y word, you know, the science word that really means that? So lecithin, or casein, or whey, things like that.
Really great details. Another question?
How about beverage? Here.
So the question is about beverages, specifically beer, which typically has some good old wheat in it.
Yeah, so usually gluten. So folks who actually have celiac disease, or honestly even gluten intolerance, do not drink beer. So they're going to have a cider option additionally. But even some of our ciders, they have to specify that they're gluten-free.
And wine.
And wine.
Anything that's not been distilled.
Yeah. So I'm just really grateful I don't have celiac disease. I'm always like, well, I love pasta and beer, thank the Lord. But it just kind of, but I think it's a great point. Or even the additives, so like the mixers that we put into our drinks. I mean, it really is just something for you to think about, because I think the biggest thing is having the staff who makes it take it seriously. So I like to explain it. I'm a big like, why does this happen? So like, here are the outcomes. Someone will be very sick or they will die. This is why this is important. Here's how it works. And even doing like a 3-minute test of like, someone has a shellfish allergy. Can I take this tongue I used to use for this and use it here? And asking your staff and then explaining, no, here's why. Because I really think that's the key. Because realistically, none of you are behind every single person cooking in your kitchen, hovering over them. If you do, that sounds like you have a lot of time on your hands. I'd love to take that time and use it for myself. But do you know what I mean? So realistically, it's the person who's making the chocolate sauce who thinks they're being helpful. We don't have canola oil, add in peanut. But if they can know beforehand, that's really the key. Because honestly, when I was first starting out in the kitchen and I didn't know as much about science or maybe perhaps food safety, I was like, I'm being helpful by letting this, adding these 2 ingredients, when really I wasn't. So if I think this needs a little, like an extra zing, I'm going to add some soy sauce to it, knowing that has wheat, right? Or I'm going to add a sprinkle of this, even though, that's what we encourage creativity in the restaurant. When it comes to allergies, we just need people to understand the ripple effects of those opportunities to be creative.
I encourage each of you to use the contact information that you've received in this webinar to ask us more questions. And like Megan just said, when we think about preventing allergies, we typically think about in the kitchen. It is a full team effort. Your service team being knowledgeable, your bartending team. Karen mentioned earlier about your menus, things posted, and we would invite you, perhaps if you're not ready to put your restaurant list on the allergen-friendly restaurant website that Megan mentioned, on your very own company website, is there something written there that says, we take knowledge very seriously with our team, and if you've got special food requests, we welcome you to come in. Our team is brilliant, and we can create something for you. So some type of even allergy information or awareness on your website can be powerful. Also, just consider, based on everything you've seen and heard today, what are your goals? Let's not just have this be a 60-ish minute conversation. What will you do better or differently with the information you've heard today? What are your steps? Often, in a full-service restaurant, there can easily be 10 people that come into the mix before any single guest is served. Who did the receiving? Who prepped items 1, 2, 3? Who was on saute and grill and expo and service? So inviting your team to get in the know with these details is imperative. So please set some goals with your leadership team about how you want to create this as information and priority. If it's not sitting down to watch this webinar, is there 90 seconds you can add into your pre-shift meeting, or 10 minutes tacked on to some other full staff meeting when we do continual education? Of course, if you'd like more details, the servesafe.com has an online allergen class. It's super approachable. I think the fee is only $15. Don't quote me, but I bet you could pack several people around the monitor for that. So I'm not allowed to say that. Please delete. So consider really getting your team allergen trained. And we do welcome you to reach out to us. We're very grateful to Pinnacle Insurance and certainly Colorado Restaurant Association for providing education for our members. And join us again. Every month these educational series occur. And next month we're talking about credit card worries and being aware of hackers. Let me throw it back to Sarah to wrap. We are so grateful for each and every one of you that take food service and allergens seriously to keep people healthy and certainly alive and thriving.
All right, well, let's just give them a thank you. Thank you all so much. And Maureen just mentioned this, but thank you again to Pinnacle Insurance for being our series sponsor. And also Tuesday, April 22nd is when we'll be talking about cyber attack and credit card fraud. We hear about this happening all the time to Home Depot and to Target right now. And so you can learn exactly what you need to be doing so it doesn't happen to you. Thank you all so much.